According to a report by Amnesty International released this week, COVID-19 laid bare the level of gender-based violence occurring across the continent and drastically increased it as families were forced into lockdown. Mozambique and Madagascar. On March the 26th of 2020, South Africa was sent into a hard lockdown, which meant that no one could leave their home except for essential services providers. Now, the report found that South African police services recorded a staggering 2,300 calls for help related to GBV in the first week of lockdown alone. It further criticizes the Southern Africa Development Community for not taking gender issues into consideration in responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. People Opposing Women Abuse is a women's rights organization focused on efforts to respond to gender-based violence hitting the nation. I'm joined now by POA CEO Mary Makgaba to speak about this in more detail. A very good afternoon to you and thank you so much for joining us.
Afternoon, thank you for having me.
Now, a shocking revelation just coming from the report by Amnesty International this week on the massive spike in violence in the third week of lockdown. And that's not only in South Africa, but in the Southern Africa region. What's your report? What is your initial reaction to that report that was released?
Thank you so much. COVID-19 pandemic has prompted the escalation of gender-based violence among women and girls in South Africa, including within the SADC region. We are not exempted. That is why the report entails and documented the following countries. It's Mozambique, it's Madagascar, it's South Africa, it's Zimbabwe, it's also Zambia. We are also among the 5 countries that experienced high rate of gender-based violence during national lockdown. Remember the 2,300 calls that we are referring to. Some of the cases were not reported. Remember when they are trapped, abused women and girls were trapped with abusers. Abused women were locked down with abusers, so they have no place to run to. They didn't have opportunities to go to access South African police services or go to courts or go to social workers or access our shelters, because it was a very, very huge problem because government wanted to address the COVID-19 pandemic. They made an oversight by not coming up with a plan for addressing the second pandemic, which is GBV, in terms of to ensure that women and girls are protected during the pandemic. That was not done. Now, what I would like to highlight is that, sorry, it's fine, continue.
So what I was just trying to say is that as POA, you also provide shelter services for these different survivors and their children who have been victims of gender-based violence. Now, how many cases can you tell us you've been able to attend to since the lockdown began, but more specifically when the regulations eased up a little bit more and people were able to move around and be able to access the telephone line to can actually report the crimes that have been committed to them?
Thank you. Thank you, dear. Remember, as an organization, our stance is that 1 woman killed, 1 woman raped, 1 woman abused to us is too many. We can talk of statistics, but at the end of the day, what we want to do is that we need to ensure that we assist these women. Just to give you reflections and indications during lockdown about POA. During lockdown, when it started on the 26th of March, the state of emergency, we never had admissions in our shelters. Remember, people were locked down. They had no place to run to. They had no access, police protection from courts coming to our shelters. But POA, we continued working in the sense that our shelters remained operational, fully operational, 24/7. Our offices, we had a plan. They were not going there every day, but we didn't have a slight increase because there were no new reportings because of the lockdown regulations. People didn't have access in terms of freedom of movement. That is why the reporting was not done. And then we didn't see an increase as an organization. Even our shelters were open 24/7. But because of the lockdown regulations, which also prevented freedom of movement for these abused women and children to come to our shelters, it was very difficult. But we used our social media platforms during lockdown. We have been operational through Facebook, through emails. We continue with telephonic counseling. Some of the calls were made. Remember, we are also aligned to the GBV Command Center, which is run by Department of Social Development. Not necessarily that our statistics will rely solely on us. Most of our stats, we have left it in our social media platforms that they can also contact GBV Command Center. Of the phones that we received, we had slight increase, We had slight increase in calls, but people coming forward for psychosocial support services, face-to-face counseling, people wouldn't come, as part when we're doing some follow-up with other people, because some could run to friends, neighbors, because lockdown regulations were not giving them freedom of movement. It was a huge problem because it was very dangerous for women, particularly for physical and sexual violence. It was more prevalent, and most of the cases were not reported because they had no place to run to, especially if you stay in an abusive relationship or abusive marriage with a partner who's working, you're not working, you can't report it, you just stay there because it's locked down. You had no place to run to the shelters or to go to the police stations because it was very tough that particular time. Our focus as a country was only on the faceless and invisible enemy, COVID-19. GBV plan was not put in place as measures to deal with it during COVID-19 lockdown.
And do you think that perhaps if there were to be another pandemic, I mean, you weren't actually categorized as essential workers, even though you were providing an essential service to those who were victims of gender-based violence. If there were to be another pandemic, do you think that government would actually be more cognizant of the issues relating to gender-based violence and actually include shelters as part of essential care workers?
Yeah, I think government has done an oversight. Civil society organization plays a very pivotal role, particularly in terms of sheltering, because we create a safe net for women. They come there, they stay there, and then they get comfort in their homes. We empower them, we give them therapeutic skills, we give them psychosocial support services, face-to-face counseling. I think that was an oversight. Remember, us as people opposing women abuse, we regarded ourselves as rendering essential services. I've developed accreditation letters during lockdown. Managers will be able to travel. I've signed them, including social workers and social auxiliary workers. We had accreditation letters that we designed on our own because we knew very well that we render essential services. We did not wait for government to come and give us an endorsement. We did such a sterling job and continued. We've never been at home. We've been working, especially for the shelters 24/7. For offices, we were rotating. We had a lockdown plan and a roster that we are following. So it is very much imperative when we have state of the emergency, a lot of consultation be done, and then GBV be considered as well.
And we commend you for the work that you've done to assist those who found themselves in those situations during this period. Now, in terms of some of the cultural and social stereotypes that tend to promote gender-based violence or even just protect the perpetrators of gender-based violence, what can you say to that and how can it be changed going forward?
I think the gender stereotypes are rooted in our societies. There are a lot of societal expectations, cultural norms and values, patriarchal attitudes. They play a very prominent role. How boys and girls are raised in our villages and our township clearly indicates that they perpetuate as causal factors of gender-based violence. For instance, if I can paint a picture, as a woman, if you grow up, you are being undermined. There are those gender stereotypes that as a woman, you're weak, you cannot be a leader. A man is superior than you being a female in terms of your gender. That's why in marriages, most men, there are breadwinners, there are head of families, But we are living in a society where currently now, it's not like during we moved to 1994. In the 80s and in the 90s, women are very independent, women are very working. That is why you find high prevalence of GBV, because men were told that they are the ones who have financial muscles. That's why if you find a relationship where a woman is working anymore and then the men earn less, or the men cannot play the role of being the breadwinner and the head of a family, anger starts, where as an indicator of relationship or marriage insecurities. So it is very much imperative that we consider that as well.
And just lastly, for anyone that's watching right now and feels that they actually want to reach out to you for assistance in whatever situation they might be in, what is the hotline that they can actually call to get assistance?
They can go to info@power.co.za, go to our website. We've got all the social media pages. We are available on Facebook. We're also available on Twitter. That's where they can get us. We are available throughout the whole country. Other provinces like not being Gauteng, we can give telephonic counseling, but those that want to come to us, we can make logistical arrangements to our shelters, pay transport for them and everything. They must just go to info@power.co.za. They'll get all the relevant information of what is Power, how we operate, and how we can best assist them.
Thank you so much for that. That was Mary Makgaba, who is the CEO of People Opposing Women Abuse, Power in short. She was speaking to us about the impact of the lockdown on levels of GBV in the country after that chilling report by the Amnesty International earlier this week.